Charlotte is nothing more than an ugly, useless loser who runs from home after being wrongfully accused. Now, with nowhere to go, she goes to live with a demon lord who teaches her how to be an S-ranked beast tamer in exchange for her soul-snatching sloppies. It all begins with Charlotte running away from a group of soldiers as if she was caught wearing Crocs in Fashion Week. The soldiers are about to venture deeper into the forest to pursue Charlotte, when one of them reveals how the demon lord who hates humans resides in that territory. Not wanting to be made into worms without having loving partners, the soldiers decide to retrieve while Charlotte breathes a sigh of relief. However, minutes later, the dumb ends up tumbling down a ditch. The following morning, Alan reads about the wicked noblewoman in the newspaper. He wonders if the wicked woman's crime was that she got caught making happy noises over mukbang videos when he notices a sudden change in the wind. Without waiting further, Alan goes into the forest and discovers an unconscious Charlotte. With great ease, he picks her up and realizes that Charlotte is built like a British child beggar from the Industrial Revolution. All of a sudden, Alan, sensing something amiss, teleports behind a soldier who had been planning to use Charlotte to become the next Mr. Beast. However, before he could get his big break, Alan quickly confronts the soldier from Nearest Kingdom. While fighting him, Alan notices how the soldier works directly for the royal family. Slightly taken aback, Alan asks the royal guard what business he has with the ugly damsel in the forest. But of course, instead of answering, the royal guard hits Alan with the typical bad guy monologue, while surrounding Alan with his goons. As the royal guard demands Charlotte to be handed over, promising to compensate him with riches and gold, Alan states that between gold and whole, he chooses Charlotte's whole.
I don't blame you. Damn good deal.
Within seconds, Alan neutralizes the soldiers with a nonverbal spell. This leads the royal guard to believe that he is facing none other than the demon lord who lives in the jungle. After giving the soldiers a good beating, Alan uses the magic of hypnosis to rewrite their memories, making it seem as if Charlotte was attacked by a monster and perished. Once that job is taken care of, Alan carries Charlotte back to his mansion, where he carefully puts her down and brews tea for them. He glances at Charlotte's face and realizes that her parents must be cousins from Sweet Home Alabama for her to be so aesthetically unpleasant. As Charlotte regains consciousness, Alan asks her if she fainted in the forest after getting railed by Tarzan. Charlotte quickly clarifies that she lost her footing while trying to get to the mansion. Upon hearing this, Alan tells Charlotte that she is in the very mansion she wished to be while directly addressing her by her name and her social standing as the fiancée of the second prince. Caught like a deer in headlights, Charlotte tries to get out of the situation when Alan confidently announces that he can sniff lies like a fart in the air. Now, with no options left, Charlotte reveals her sob story and how she was exiled from the kingdom. She begins by telling Alan how she was summoned by her fiancé, Prince Cecil, in front of all Botox-crazed nobles. The prince then insulted her for being a child out of wedlock, and then accused her of treason. Dumbfounded in the royal court, she tried to clear her name, but nobody believed her over the prince. However, before she was beheaded, she decided to flee in the forest. After hearing her story, Alan tells a crying Charlotte that she really has a face only a mother can love, but he also assures her that he believes in her story. Hearing this, Charlotte states that he is the first person to ever believe her. After expressing her gratitude, Charlotte tells Alan that she does not wish to overextend her stay. When the demon lord inquires about her next step, Charlotte reveals that she is going to risk Tarzan, as she is sure he must be tired of using monkeys as blow-up dolls. Hearing this, Alan asks Charlotte if she can clean because there is no way Tarzan would trade Gorilla Grip for her chocolate starfish. As Charlotte hesitantly reveals that she can, in fact, clean, Alan states that since she is not pretty enough to take over the duties of his right hand, she can live with him as a live-in maid. While the proposal is pleasant, Charlotte nervously reminds the demon lord how she is more in demand than Elon Musk's robots. Alan sighs and then reveals that the reason he is so hell-bent on helping her out is because, like her, he was also betrayed. As it turns out, years ago, the demon lord was invited to join an adventurer's party. Hoping to have fun and make friends, he agreed, but what he did not know until very late was that the pesky humans were just using him to break a seal of a temple, and when they had achieved their motives, they left him to die. After hearing this, Charlotte tears up and says why would anyone betray the Walmart version of Ken Kaneki? Having never experienced love before, Alan puts a death curse on himself and forces Charlotte to abandon her wish of becoming Tarzan's humping pillow. Not wanting an ugly lesbian to top her, Charlotte agrees to become Alan's maid. A few days later, Alan arrives and finds the house squeaky clean. He commends Charlotte on her hard work and states that even though she is a noblewoman, she cleans like an illegal immigrant. Charlotte then admits to cleaning her home, which makes Alan realize that Charlotte is a noblewoman only by title. With nothing more to clean, Alan tells Charlotte that she can do whatever she wants to in her free time while he goes to tend to his own work in the library. After some time, Alan gets up only to find Charlotte counting grain on the floor, sighing at the antics of the noble bumpkin. Alan asks her about her hobbies. However, to his dismay, Charlotte reveals that when she was not cleaning, she was doing her bridal training. Hearing this, Alan thanks God for making him a person with XY chromosomes, because being a woman sucks in the anime world too. Taking pity on Charlotte, Alan asks her if she enjoyed her bridal training, but of course, Charlotte reveals she was always getting yelled at for messing up. After hearing this, Alan reflects on his own life and realizes that while he was having a time of his life in a magic academy, Charlotte was scrubbing floors. This leads Alan to take matters into his own hands, and he announces that he will now give her a crash course in all things naughty. After leaving momentarily, Alan returns with a lot of shopping bags. He proudly tells Charlotte that he is going to turn her into a beast who seeks out pleasure and pleasure alone. Without further ado, Alan unveils the shopping bags which contain expensive treats. He then tells Charlotte that they will start by having snacks for dinner, but this causes Charlotte to spiral out of control. As she insists on eating greens, Alan realizes that the Duke's family must have treated Charlotte pretty harshly for her to be so naive and submissive. And so to make her agree, Alan tells Charlotte that if she does not listen to him, he will go all emo on her again. As Charlotte reluctantly takes a bite of a cake, she starts to sob with happiness and expresses so much gratitude to Alan that he promises to lay down all the pleasures this world has to offer at her feet. After having cakes with Charlotte, Alan retires to his room, where instead of having a good night's sleep, he stays up to plan all the naughty things he will introduce to Charlotte. The next morning, Alan proudly holds a book containing a naughty list. However, after a moment, Alan realizes that his list is quite subpar and decides to just discard the book altogether, as global warming is a myth, and there are plenty of trees waiting to be made into papers. Upon stepping out of his room, Alan is greeted by none other than Charlotte carrying a broom. The girl greets him and lightly scolds him for sleeping in his study. Alan laughs nervously, revealing his plan of sleeping until noon when he notices the worn-out broom. Charlotte reveals how she plans on cleaning the entrance today, which prompts Alan to tell Charlotte that she doesn't need to become the Mother Teresa of cleaning. However, Charlotte politely insists on returning his goodness by cleaning up his place. For a second, Alan finds himself in a trance as he observes Charlotte's bright face despite facing so many hardships. After recovering from his simp moment, Alan asks Charlotte if she cleaned every day at the Duke's mansion. When she gives him a nervous laugh, Alan thinks about how every noble has an army of servants, so if Charlotte's family was making her clean, then they must really hate her. All this realization leaves a bitter taste in Alan's mouth, which doesn't go unnoticed by Charlotte, so she quickly excuses herself to go clean. Now alone, Alan thinks about how Charlotte never speaks ill about her despicable family and her fiancé who framed her for a crime she never committed. He also realizes that if he was in Charlotte's position, he would have canceled the Duke and the Prince on Twitter if they so much as dared said the wrong slang in front of him. As Alan tries to come up with ways of turning Charlotte into an Ohio resident, he hears a familiar noise outside. Without waiting a second, he rushes out and finds a girl dressed as a cat talking to Charlotte. Alan quickly introduces Charlotte as a new maid, which excites the cat girl so much that she kicks the nefarious demon lord to the curb and introduces herself to Charlotte as Miecha, a servant of a courier company with a weirdly long name. As Charlotte gives a confused look, Alan steps in and reveals that Miecha carries his mail. Miecha then looks at Charlotte and curiously tells Alan that his maid looks very familiar. Without waiting, Miecha looks at the stack of newspapers and finds a sketch of Charlotte. The look of horror dawns upon Charlotte, while Alan tries to salvage the situation, but before he can come up with an elaborate lie, Miecha assures him that she doesn't give a flying kebab about Charlotte's identity, as she is hella focused on her job. Feeling grateful, Alan gets down to business and asks Miecha to carry a package for him. When Charlotte inquires, Alan reveals that he delivers potions to the magic store in town. Miecha then comments on how Alan's potions sell as quickly as her customer, Stoop Dog's weed. On that note, Charlotte asks Alan why he doesn't just open shop in the town and live there too. Alan then reveals that he doesn't like being surrounded by too many people. This leads to Miecha revealing how Alan's antisocial tendencies earned him the reputation of being a demon lord. Now shocked, Charlotte realizes that Alan is just a socially awkward but powerful mage, who is only a demon lord because of his resting mean face. Wanting to change the subject, Alan asks Miecha if she can bring him other items. When Miecha shows him a list of inventory, Alan asks Charlotte to pick whatever she needs. Pleased by this, Charlotte confesses that before meeting Alan, she would just stuff a rat up her hoo-ha when she had her periods. The next day, Miecha returns with the items Charlotte had wanted. She then turns to Alan, who had ordered a mysterious box, and asks him what he plans to do with it. Alan reveals that the item is for Charlotte, and with that, he unveils the punching bag inside the box. Surprised, Charlotte tells Alan that he didn't need to order a punching bag when she's right in front of him.
What do you mean by that?
Hearing this, Alan tells Charlotte that this is the second naughty thing he has planned for her. After pasting a picture of Prince Cecil, Alan asks Charlotte to relieve her stress and frustration by hitting the punching bag as hard as she can. As Charlotte hesitates, Alan calmly tells her that she doesn't need to cosplay as the carpets at Buckingham Palace and let others walk all over her. He further states that getting angry is the key to living more freely, and if she keeps everything bottled up, then she's bound to explode sooner or later. However, despite the lecture, Charlotte tells Alan that she's not angry at all. Alan interrupts her and reveals how he went through the newspapers and read how Prince Cecil trampled all over her dignity, and now the entire Neura's kingdom is against her. But even then, Charlotte insists that she's not angry at the prince, as she believes he had good reasons to do what he did. This infuriates Alan, who claims that even if the prince had good reasons, she didn't deserve to be tossed aside as an unwanted jizz rag. Charlotte sighs and reveals that she was raised by her family, who fixed her marriage to the prince, so she can't resent the prince for wanting to escape a marriage that he never wanted. At that moment, Alan realizes that it is going to be one hell of a ride to break Charlotte, as she is hell-bent on going to the seventh heaven. He also comes to the conclusion that Charlotte's wound is deep, and she has gotten used to suppressing her desires. Just then, Maicha whispers in Alan's ear, telling him to give it a rest. Alan agrees, but then comes up with a crazier plan as he tells Charlotte to strike him instead. Confused, Charlotte asks Alan if he means stroke, cause she sure can stroke that thing. Alan then clarifies that he really wants her to hit him. When Charlotte refuses, Alan uses his magic to make her punch him. All of a sudden, Charlotte transforms into Meowmid Ali and strikes Alan so hard that it sends him flying. While Charlotte starts to freak out, Alan assures her that he did this to make her know that he would never abandon her in any circumstance. He also states that since she lives with him now, she's free to do whatever she likes. This makes Charlotte realize how Alan will go to extreme measures to make her see that she's not a slave working in the cotton fields. Yet despite seeing the goodness behind Alan's actions, Charlotte gets mad at him for putting himself at risk. This makes Alan rather happy as he starts to realize that Charlotte feels comfortable with being angry at him. As Alan heals himself, Charlotte begs him to never do something risky again, which Alan quickly accepts. Maicha then interrupts Alan and Charlotte by reminding them that they can always trust her and her courier company to deliver protection. This confuses Alan and Charlotte, as they wonder why they would need protection when the house is safe and sound. The next day, Alan asks Charlotte if she would like to have tea or coffee. When Charlotte politely tells him that she would have whatever he is having, Alan unveils Pokemon's vomit and announces that he will drink the reverse juices of his favorite Twitch thought. Scared of her life, Charlotte quickly tells Alan that she will be having the tea. Once his agenda is fulfilled, Alan reprimands Charlotte for not having a say in her life matters. However, in response, Charlotte tells Alan that she is just a girl. Over tea, Charlotte admits that running away from her house and choosing her own beverage are the only two choices she has made so far. This cracks up Alan, who then tells Charlotte that if she wishes to try out something new, she should tell him. Just when Charlotte is about to speak on the subject, a very unfortunate-looking girl makes an appearance at Alan's window. Unsurprised, Alan asks the intruder how she managed to find him. To this, the girl reveals that she asked the townies if they had seen a special needs sorcerer. Alan sighs while Charlotte curiously asks him if the girl is a beggar since she doesn't seem to be wearing enough clothes. Instead of waiting for a man to introduce her, the girl reveals she's a strong, independent woman named Aruka Crawfords, who also happens to be Alan's little sister. Alan quickly clarifies that Aruka is his stepsister as he lost his OG parents when he was young, but thankfully the Crawfords took him in. Upon hearing this, Charlotte states that they must have had a lot of moments where Aruka was stuck in the washing machine. On that note, Aruka quickly asks Alan if he is dating Miss Plain Jane over here. In response, both Alan and Charlotte vehemently denied being in a relationship. Alan even tells Aruka that she should never repeat what she just said, as he is sure Charlotte would hate being associated with a social misfit. Aruka agrees and even states that if she was ever mistaken as Alan's girlfriend, she would have a gender-changing surgery and become a man. With that, she asks Alan about Charlotte. Instead of beating around the bush, Alan honestly reveals the truth about Charlotte. As Aruka learns of the full truth, she thanks God for not being related to this moron by blood. She then tells Alan that he should have introduced Charlotte to the naughty things that women usually enjoy. Despite finding Aruka odd, Charlotte asks her if she comes off as a weirdo. Aruka quickly reveals that while Alan might not be good at anything else, he can easily sniff out the bad guys. Speaking of the devil, Alan, dying out of boredom, asks Aruka why she is here. Aruka then reveals that she originally came to bring him home, but seeing how they have a new toy, she has decided to teach Charlotte naughty things too. Alan smirks arrogantly and tells Aruka that only he can teach Charlotte how to be naughty. Aruka quickly pulls Charlotte to her side and proudly states that if Charlotte stays in her company, she'll be the next star of Naughty America. Things quickly start to escalate, and a brawl starts between the two siblings. Alan angrily asks Aruka if she would like to have a competition to determine who can teach Charlotte naughty things. And while Charlotte becomes dizzy, Aruka accepts the challenge. Later that day, Alan and the girls step into the town. However, before they can progress on, Alan quickly changes the color to Charlotte's hair. When Aruka compliments Charlotte on her dark hair, Alan interjects, stating that he likes blonde Charlotte the most. This causes the virgins to tweak until Alan pulls them out of their trance. Snapping back to reality, Aruka grabs Charlotte by the hand and announces that she'll be taking Charlotte to dress up as every girl loves that. Now finding himself in a store ridden with females, Alan reminisces about the time when the Crawfords took him in. From an early age, Aruka had been competitive, challenging Alan to various games, and despite losing like a damn fool, she would never give up. In the present, Alan wonders if this was Aruka's attempt to get closer to him. His chain of thoughts are then broken by Aruka's summon. Upon meeting her, Alan is greeted by Charlotte in short dress. Bewitched by the baddie version of Charlotte, Alan punches himself in the stomach to get rid of the raging tent in his pants. Realizing that Charlotte's holy thighs are causing her bro to go bonkers, Aruka quickly sends her to the dressing room while she sits with Alan for a chat. Without skipping a beat, she asks Alan what he wants her to do. Alan tells Aruka that he would like her to get more information on the nearest kingdom and how they perceive Charlotte as. Understanding her mission, Aruka asks Alan if he would also like some tea on the prince and his family. However, when Alan tells Aruka to calm her horses, she asks him why he is not in the mood for some vengeance. On the contrary, Alan states that once he gets to know the prince and the duke, he would want to subject them to medieval torture, which is why it's best he doesn't get more information on the prince. Hearing this, Aruka smiles and tells Alan that he has changed into a person who cares for others. Their conversation is then interrupted by Charlotte's bleep voice. When Aruka comes to her aid, Charlotte asks her to zip her up. However, something terrifying catches Aruka's eye at that moment. Once Charlotte is all dolled up, Aruka brings her to Alan and asks him to look at Charlotte's back. Before he can say no, Aruka shows Alan Charlotte's back, which is covered in scars. Alan's eyes widen, but for Charlotte's sake, he decides to keep quiet. Instead, he compliments Charlotte on her new dress, but deep down, Alan finds his head filled with dark thoughts. He tries to feel Charlotte's pain by imagining how she would have been whipped hard enough for the scars to take permanent residence on Charlotte's back. With a heavy heart, Alan heals Charlotte's back, which leads him to realize that nobody bothered to give her a proper treatment. Now feeling angry, Alan tells Aruka that he needs her help to terminate everyone that caused Charlotte pain. After exiting out of the shop, Alan tells the girls that he will be teaching Charlotte the art of splurging. Without waiting for a response, he takes the girls to a Miniso shop. When the plushies fail to amuse Charlotte, the Crawfords take Charlotte to buy other items. After exhausting their stamina and purse, the gang decides to sit at a restaurant where Alan and Aruka start playfully fighting. However, Charlotte thinks they're fighting and immediately dives to resolve the issue. As Charlotte tells them that fighting is bad, Alan and Aruka hesitantly apologize to her. On the way home, Aruka stops to simp over a vegetable, while Alan takes Charlotte to a jewelry shop where he buys her a hairpin. However, the moment is interrupted by two ugly thugs looking for a fight. Just when Alan is about to raise his fists, he remembers how Charlotte told him not to fight. So instead, he apologizes to the thugs who only grow cocky and ask Alan for a night with Charlotte. Now furious, Alan gives the thugs a beating to remember. The crowd cheers for him, but Alan quickly apologizes to Charlotte for scaring her. Charlotte smiles and assures Alan that while she doesn't like violence, she knows he was doing it only to protect her. Feeling relieved, Alan smiles, realizing that he has grown to care for Charlotte. Just when Alan starts to dream about filling Charlotte with his Alfredo sauce,
Yeah, boy.
a huge robot-like creature asks Alan if he was the one who took out his good-for-nothing thugs. Realizing the robot wants a fight, Charlotte tries to stop Alan from confronting the newcomer. However, Alan casually tells Charlotte to calm her bazookas and proceeds to level with the NPC. Now facing the gigantic creature, Alan suddenly asks him if he is called Megath. However, instead of answering Alan, the robot becomes rather man, which makes Alan sure that the person he is talking to is not a stranger after all. With a friendly pat, Alan tells Megath about how he is Alan from Athena Magical Academy. Upon hearing that, the mechanical cousin of Lizzo falls to his knees, begging for mercy. Megath tells Alan that he was not aware of the fact he was talking to the great demon lord himself. The onlookers, including Charlotte and Megath's goons, are all suddenly startled by Megath waving the white flag. Confused and furious, one of the goons asks Megath to smash Alan, as if he was a 90s housewife. However, Megath becomes furious and makes his subordinates bow to Alan. Seeing the scene unfold, Charlotte becomes more confused until Aruka arrives and reveals that their father is the chairperson of the largest magical academy in the country. And while nothing is better than nepotism, Alan did not need their father's help to become great, as he graduated from the academy at the tender age of 12, becoming the youngest graduate in history. And since he was quite the Einstein of the magic world, Alan quickly became a teacher's assistant and was later nicknamed as the Demon Lord by the students. In the present, Alan asks Megath to raise his head only for the robot to be met with a look that says Alan is about to make him an orphan by destroying his motherboard. On the other hand, the Demon Lord tells Megath that while he did not cause harm to him, he had hurt his Charlotte. All of a sudden, Alan stops in his tracks and wonders why he is calling Charlotte his. After a couple of days, Mayacha and Aruka return to Alan's estate, only to find him wallowing in his misery. Knowing that only investing in crypto or love can do that to a man, the girls ask Alan if he and Charlotte are having trouble in paradise. Alan sighs, confirming their doubts, and reveals how a few days ago he offered Charlotte wages for her services. But Charlotte, being a capitalist's wet dream, refused to take money. So after a lot of back and forth, Alan managed to convince her, and once she accepted, he asked her what she intended to do with her first salary. With slight hesitation, Charlotte reveals that she wants to go to the town alone. Now in the present, Alan sits sulking in the corner, torn by the thought of Charlotte going off on her own. He continues his story by telling Mayacha and Aruka that Charlotte had told him to forget about it. But he knew well that when a woman made a request, forgetting isn't really an option. So with a determined smile, he assured her that, using his magic, he would make it possible for her to visit the town. After hearing about Alan's dilemma, Aruka tells him that his problem is solvable. A few hours later, Charlotte is allowed to chill on her own in the town. Of course, unbeknownst to her, Alan, Aruka, and Mayacha all happen to be tailing her from afar. While secretly spying on Charlotte, the girls ask Alan if he knows why Charlotte made the sudden request of going to town on her own. When Alan reveals that Charlotte wanted to buy something but refused to tell him what, the girls assume Charlotte is having a good girls gone wild moment and will probably be purchasing a happy device named They Pop a Pound Cake. However, instead of being intimidated by a thrust buddy, Alan becomes rather happy at the fact that Charlotte is embracing her womanhood. As they continue stalking Charlotte, Mayacha grows concerned and informs the gang that the path Charlotte is headed towards is a dangerous one. Turns out the district of Murd is worse than the streets of New York City. Mayacha also reveals that a party called the Serpent Fangs rule the area of Murd, and its leader is nefariously known as Grow, the Viper Charmer. Upon hearing this, Aruka asks Alan if they should stop Charlotte, but he tells them that they should let Charlotte have her first adventure. Instead of hearing any more complaints, Alan takes off while Charlotte runs into Grow and his gang. Just as Aruka and Mayacha start to freak out, Grow and his gang happily welcome Charlotte. Alan returns and reveals how he threatened everyone and made sure no one would harm Charlotte. However, Charlotte wins everyone's trust by offering the bad guys some healing potions. Grow becomes tearful at Charlotte's kindness and promises to never walk the path of wickedness. He then asks Charlotte what her relationship is with the Demon Lord. After pausing for a minute, Charlotte reveals that when she had no place, Alan offered her one and even hired her, so it means that Alan is her master. Upon hearing this, Grow and his boys wonder if a goddess like Charlotte is being gaslighted, love-bombed, and manipulated by a wicked man like Alan. However, Charlotte clarifies how Alan is actually a good man, and they stay up all night doing naughty things. Hearing this, Aruka and Mayacha give Alan a bombastic side-eye, which prompts Alan to clarify that they just stayed up all night playing Clash of Clans. After clearing up the misunderstanding, Alan and Aruka head to make the streets safe for Charlotte. Once the job is done, Mayacha informs Alan that Charlotte is done with her shopping and is coming to meet them. Seconds later, Charlotte arrives with a townie who reveals how everyone is grateful to the Demon Lord for making the streets safe. While Alan is dumbfounded over being treated as a nice guy, Charlotte reveals that she went shopping to get gifts for Aruka and Mayacha, as they have always been too kind to her. While this makes the girls happy, Alan becomes upset and asks Charlotte if she got him a present too. Charlotte then reveals how she searched for a present but could not find anything for him. Hearing this, Alan becomes frustrated and states that even if she bottled her fart in a jar and gave it to him, he would be glad. Charlotte becomes sad and asks Alan to let her mend his robe and also reveal all the things he likes so she can choose a present for him later. With nothing better to do, Alan decides to take Charlotte to Unoa, a neighboring region, for a trip. However, before taking the trip, Charlotte tells Alan that she loves the recent naughty thing he asked her to do. Alan smiles and admits that it is indeed naughty to read novels when the entire country is slaving away for basic necessities. Charlotte continues to gush over how she discovered so many wonderful places through the book, which prompts Alan to ask her what place she would like to visit. When Charlotte hesitantly asks him what will happen as she reveals her favorite destination, Alan casually reveals they will of course take a trip to that destination. Hearing this, Charlotte becomes upset and says that she feels incredibly indebted to him. In response, Alan tells her that if she is so grateful, then she can play peekaboo with his trouser snake. In response, Charlotte states that if she continued being so naughty, she would be on Santa's naughty list, which she does not want. Hearing this, Alan admits that he himself doesn't want Charlotte to lose her purity, at least not so soon. However, his desire to make Charlotte happy overpowers him, and eventually, Alan tells her that they should take a trip as they can have treats and relax at the hot springs. While the idea tempts her, Charlotte refuses to reveal her dream destination. This prompts Alan to resort to nice guy methods, which involve putting a death curse on himself. However, before he can do so, Charlotte begs him to stop. All of a sudden, the door opens, revealing Myacha. She greets Charlotte and Alan and reveals that she has a special delivery for them, a trip to the Unoa district. So now in the present, Charlotte gushes over the beautiful fields of Unoa like an orphan kid, experiencing parental love for the first time. Seeing her happy, Alan tells Charlotte that she can let her guard down as nobody would recognize her as the disgraced noble here in Unoa. Both Charlotte and Alan then discuss how the denizens of Unoa are kind enough to invite them, of course. What they do not know is that it was actually Aruka and Myacha who got the tickets for them. Perfect. Just so Alan can fill Charlotte's oven with his hot dog. After arriving at the resort, Alan and Charlotte are greeted by the baddie receptionist who mistakes them for a couple. Not wanting someone as hot as her thinking he is married, Alan asks her why she mistook them as lovers. The receptionist then reveals that the resort package is clearly for lovers, which makes Alan really angry as he realizes he got pranked by Myacha, and she never even said Bazinga. Now out of options, Alan decides to keep up the charade of being Charlotte's man. Later that day, Alan and Charlotte decide to relax in the hot spring. Wanting to woo Charlotte out of her G-string, Alan orders her an ice cream and then puts a spell on it to make sure it does not melt. Seeing this, the onlookers start ordering ice creams and then insist Alan to put a spell on their ice creams as well. And since Alan is in a jolly good mood, he agrees to help everyone, which in return impresses Charlotte. Later that night, Charlotte and Alan enter the honeymoon suite, and after a lot of freakouts, they decide to sleep the night away, much to Myacha and Aruka's disappointment. That night, Charlotte dreams about meeting her mother who has passed away. Alan, being the great mage that he is, sneaks in Charlotte's dream and assures her mother that he will look after her daughter. The following morning, Alan brings Charlotte to visit your family, aka the zoo. While she is delighted to see all the magical creatures Unoa's zoo has to offer, Alan realizes that Charlotte is not entirely excited, so he presses on the matter until Charlotte reveals that she wants to go to the petting zoo. Alan becomes excited to hear that as he realizes that Charlotte would probably love to blow kisses on his naked mole rat. Out of sheer happiness, Alan asks Charlotte if she would like to have anything. When Charlotte hesitates, Alan instantly puts a death curse on himself, until Charlotte caves and asks Alan to put matching cat ears on. Despite being embarrassed by the request, Alan takes the cat ears from Charlotte and puts them on to make her happy. The two of them then arrive at the petting zoo, where Alan is taken back to see capybaras. Turns out, Alan does not like capybaras because he lacks taste, and also because in this world, capybaras are magical beasts who can destroy mountains if they are hungry. A girl hears Alan yapping about capybaras and comes to inform him that he does not need to worry about them as they are deep in the forest. Feeling relieved, Alan turns to find Charlotte, who happens to be bawling her eyes out over all the fluffy animals. Realizing how much she loves fluff, Alan decides to communicate with the pink rabbits. He tells the three greedy rabbits that he will buy them any treat they like if they agree to play with Charlotte. Once the deal is set in motion, Alan feels proud and thinks of himself as the Wizard of Oz until he sees Charlotte reliving her Disney princess moment. Even the onlookers are surprised to see all the magical animals cozying up to Charlotte. After having a great day, Charlotte and Alan decide to rest on the bench, where Charlotte starts to gush about how much she loves petting animals. Alan looks up and finds all the animals lovingly cheering for Charlotte, but since only he knows their language, he shudders in fear as the seemingly adorable animals cuss at him for breathing the same air as Charlotte. Sighing, Alan stands up and informs Charlotte that there are many types of magic and special skills in the world. While magic can be acquired through lessons, some people have a natural inclination towards it as well. This is also why only he can perform high-level magic without needing to say any spell like a sore loser. With that, Alan drops the bomb on Charlotte that she happens to be a magical creature tamer. Despite the obvious name, Charlotte, being a total nincompoop, fails to understand what that means, so Alan reveals that a magical tamer can communicate with magical creatures and also use them for advantage, while Charlotte is at a loss of words since she never imagined a useless ugly like her to be anything more than a useless ugly. Meanwhile, Alan thinks about how Charlotte can probably tame a high-level magical creature like the fener, and perhaps she even unknowingly used her taming skills on Grow and his thugs, but that is likely unheard of. All of a sudden, the NPC from earlier returns and begs Alan and Charlotte to come with her. After following her into a building, an old man asks the female NPC if she is sure she got the right tamers for the job. Before she could answer, the old man looks up to Alan and asks him if he is Crawford's son. When Alan confirms, the old man and his subordinates become rather satisfied and begs Alan for help. Upon inquiring further, the old man leads Alan and Charlotte to a room where they are greeted by an angry fener in a cage. The good old man then informs Alan how they rescued the fener who had been shot by a hunter. Assessing the damage, Alan recalls how feners are an endangered species, which is why hunting them is illegal. But since they are so valuable, the hunters never stop hunting them. The old man chimes again, revealing that they need experienced tamers because they cannot communicate with the angry fener and therefore are unable to heal him. As Alan tries to communicate with the fancy dog, it ends up going south. But before he can try again, chaos breaks down in the building as the news of the fener's mother approaching the building breaks out. Seeing the panic at the disco, Alan starts thinking and realizes that the female fener can easily wreck the entire city. With so much at stake, Alan decides to stop the mother fener himself before she takes the town to Pound Town. Before Alan can leave, Charlotte begs him to let her talk to the fener cub. Despite being scared for Charlotte's security, Alan realizes how far she has come and agrees to let her talk to the fener cub. With more pressing matters at hand, Alan leaves to stop Mama Fener and her pack. However, upon facing his opponent, Alan realizes how deadly an emotional fener can be. Suddenly, a capybara named Gosetsu arrives on the site and tells Alan not to harm the female fener or else the cub fener will become a meth addict. Not wanting advice from a cheap version of a pig, Alan rudely asks Gosetsu what he wants. Gosetsu explains that he first saw Charlotte when she fainted in the forest and found her so gorgeous that he started to stalk her everywhere. He also realized that in order to serve Charlotte, he'd have to get rid of the ugly demon lord who is such a walking loser that he can't decide on one hair color. Hearing this, Alan smugly asks Gosetsu that he is so maidenless that he has to look for a partner in another species. Things quickly escalate and a showdown ensues between Gosetsu and Alan until Gosetsu uses his power to free the fener and her cubs. He also tells Alan that he told the fener that Alan has stolen her baby. Just when things appear to look really bad for Alan, Charlotte arrives with the fener cub and other magical creatures. She informs Alan that she managed to communicate with the fener cub and even asks the other creatures for help. Once the misunderstanding between the feners is solved, Gosetsu faces Charlotte and forces her to leave Alan. However, Charlotte quickly defends Alan's virtue, which makes Gosetsu so furious that he viciously attacks Alan only to lose miserably. The fight, however, makes Gosetsu see how Alan truly cares about Charlotte, which makes him relieved. With the day saved, Alan and Charlotte return to the resort and prepare to leave when the feners arrive to say their goodbyes. Before leaving, Mayachep and Aruka reappear with the hunters who were the cause of all that trouble. Alan, feeling rather happy, decides to punish the hunters by letting the feners have their way with them. The moment Alan and Charlotte turn to leave, Charlotte tells the demon lord that the fener cub she saved wants to be with her. Surprised by this, Alan asks the mama fener if she is ready to part with her cub. The receptionist Batty quickly interrupts the conversation and states that since their mansion is not far away, the fener cub can join his mother and pack easily. Relieved by this, Alan tells Charlotte that she can keep the fancy dog, as it is always nice to have more family. This makes Charlotte happy, and she asks Alan if he considers her as family. Alan quickly states that she should not be asking the obvious, making Charlotte as red as a baboon's booty. On the way back, Alan is bamboozled by the presence of Gosetsu, who proudly states he is here to protect Charlotte from the sinful demon lord. After a couple of days since their return from the underwhelming trip, Alan finds Charlotte leaving with the fener Lou as usual. When Alan asks Lou to take care of Charlotte, he ends up receiving a cold shoulder from the dog. Once they leave, Alan is greeted by Gosetsu, who tells Alan that he knows how he must feel now that Charlotte is spending more time with Lou than him. Alan, unable to counter Gosetsu, goes into introspection mode and realizes that while he is sad, he is also happy about the fact that Charlotte has a goal of becoming a magical creature tamer. Alan then recalls the moment when Charlotte came to him with the request of becoming a magical tamer. In that moment, he found himself feeling like a proud father whose daughter chose to become a respectful Walmart worker rather than an onlifen's hoe. And so, out of sheer happiness, he agreed to teach her everything there is to know about magical creature tamers. During the classes, Alan realized that Charlotte is actually a sharp girl, which is rare for women. During one of their training sessions, Alan asks Charlotte to incorporate her lessons into practicality. Following orders, Charlotte orders Lou to perform a series of circus tricks, which the fener easily does. This makes Alan rather impressed, and he tells Charlotte how it is nearly impossible to communicate with feners, as they are like your girlfriend when she is angry. Gosetsu, who had been observing the scene from afar, also adds his 2 cents by telling Charlotte she has acquired the skill of beast communication. Hearing this, Charlotte asks Gosetsu if beast communication is the same magic that automatically replaces the language of magical creatures with human language. When Alan confirms, Charlotte begs him to let her try beast conversation on Lou. And while it is unheard of a fener to use human language, Alan grants Charlotte the permission to try. To everyone's surprise, Charlotte succeeds in making Lou talk like a human being. But now that Lou can speak, it becomes quite evident that he hates Alan for being near Charlotte. Later that day, Alan makes a special bathing area for Lou. Charlotte, feeling pleased, asks Lou to thank Alan, and while Lou hates the idea of being nice to a stinking human being like Alan, he agrees to make his mommy happy. Once that matter is settled, Alan tells Lou to try out his new bath, but before he has a chance to do that, Gosetsu jumps in the bath. Feeling angry, Alan tells the capybara the bath is only for humans and feners. As Gosetsu realizes the racism against him, he tells Alan capybara lives matter. But for the sake of developing the plot, Gosetsu transforms into a trap which you lonely sweaty losers can only dream about. Later on, Charlotte joins Alan on a bench while Gosetsu and Lou enjoy themselves in the bath. The two humans get to talking when Alan reveals how the previous owner of his mansion, an elf, disappeared without a trace. Naturally, there were a lot of rumors regarding the disappearance of the elf. Some said he ate mushrooms and went on a trip where only Zeus can reach, while others believed he was subjected to a monster's wrath. Right that instant, Charlotte, scared out of her damn mind, points at the bath. Alan then looks up and finds Gosetsu covered in mushrooms. Confused, Alan states that he knows that when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, but what should one do when life gives them mushrooms? Just then, a dark-skinned baddie angrily accuses Alan of stealing her mushrooms. As everyone gets to talking, the girl introduces herself as Grim. Alan, on the other hand, notices the underground chamber and realizes that Grim has been living on his property for quite some time now. Grim then bluntly asks Alan what he's doing here, which confuses him, and he tells Grim that she's the intruder here since he lives in the mansion. Hearing this, Grim becomes upset and states that the mansion belongs to her. It then becomes clear to everyone present in the room that Grim is the elf that disappeared 30 years ago. After talking further, Gosetsu realizes that Grim hails from a prestigious line of elves known as the Dark Elves, which can survive 100 years without eating or drinking. However, Alan doesn't give a rat's ass about who Grim is and tries to get her to sell the mansion to him. Observing his desperation, Grim smiles and tells Alan that she prefers living in the basement, but wants his help with something. Alan tells Grim that he'd rather solve the issue with money, but Charlotte manages to convince him otherwise. Pushed into a corner, Alan asks Grim what she wants and the elf reveals that she's actually an author. But since she had a writer's block, she had been hiding away from her scary editor for 30 years. Now seeing him and Charlotte together, she wants them to act lovey-dovey so she can gain inspiration and write a story. Not wanting to lose his master bedroom, Alan begrudgingly agrees and performs a romantic scene with Charlotte, but Grim ends up being pissed at him as Alan uses magic to touch Charlotte instead of directly touching her. In her state of fury, Grimm hands Alan and Charlotte a script which they can use to flirt, but Alan becomes frustrated and tells Grimm to take her lame Wattpad script and piss off. He also states that he knows Charlotte is uncomfortable with flirting with him since he's not someone she likes. But to his surprise, Charlotte nervously tells Alan that she actually doesn't mind flirting with him. Now pumped up, Alan agrees to do the cheesy scenes with Charlotte on the condition that he wouldn't do anything indecent with her, at least not on screens. Grimm happily agrees to the terms and gives Alan a new script where he and Charlotte are newlyweds. As they start playing out the roles, Alan gets a massive nosebleed seeing Charlotte dressed as a trad waifu. Grimm quickly becomes angry and asks Alan why he's behaving like the pathetic losers who are watching this video. In retaliation, Alan confronts Grimm, asking her why she's making Charlotte say so many suggestive lines. Grimm tries to tell Alan that this is just casual flirting, but the Demon Lord has none of it, so eventually, Grimm agrees to tone things down a notch. However, when it's time to practice for the second shot, Grimm is met with another disappointing scene from Alan, who starts tweaking when Charlotte calls him by a nickname. Alan shouts at Grimm for purposely giving him a heart attack, but the elf casually tells him that it's common for newlyweds to call each other by nicknames. Accepting his fate, Alan agrees to keep playing this wretched role while fully knowing that Grimm is toying with him. The elf announces that she is done with the newlyweds concept and now wants to do a young couple scene. This time, Alan is a high school student whose childhood best friend, Charlotte, gets kidnapped by thugs played by Gosetsu and Lou. Once the scene starts, Alan sees Charlotte being tied down and ends up losing his In his state of anger, he punches Gosetsu and Lou, which knocks him out cold. Alan then turns to Charlotte, reenacting the scene from Grimm's script, but somewhere while acting, Alan realizes how Charlotte actually makes her heart doki doki. Once the scene ends, Alan becomes sure of his feelings, but decides to keep them to himself, as he believes Charlotte would be pressured into reciprocating his affections. For the next scene, Grimm announces that Charlotte will play the role of a mistreated princess. Alan would be her prince and Gosetsu will be the evil stepmother who overworks Charlotte to the bone. With everything set in motion, Charlotte becomes rather sad and thinks how this scene hits close to home, as this was her life before she met Alan. As the scene continues, Lou shows up as Charlotte's fairy dog mother and turns her rags to a beautiful gown, which she uses to woo Prince Alan. While playing out the scene, Charlotte also finds her heart racing. The scene then changes to Prince Alan coming to Charlotte's house to find her. Her evil stepmother, Gosetsu, tries to stop Prince Alan, but since his love is so skibidi toilet that he manages to spot his beloved Charlotte, even when she is dressed in rags. Charlotte, realizing she feels something for Alan, asks him what he thinks of her. At first, Alan is startled by the sudden question, but then tries to truthfully answer when suddenly a man bursts through the walls and ties Grimm down. He introduces himself as Grimm's editor and apologizes for any inconvenience. With that, he takes Grimm with him, not knowing how he destroyed Confession of the Year. Before Charlotte came under Alan's care, she was taken in by the Evans after her mother died. Since she was the Duke's illegitimate daughter, Charlotte was no more than a servant in the mansion and was subjected to mistreatment by not only her family but also by the servants. In all of her misery, the only source of comfort Charlotte had was her half-sister, Natalia, who loved her big sister dearly. In the present, Alan and his gang happen to be sailing towards the Athena Magical Academy, which consists of a whole island. Upon arriving on the land, Aruka informs Charlotte that most of the people living on the island are basically associated with the academy. But simply exploring the island isn't the reason why the whole squad is here. Turns out, Natalia was spotted on the island alone. When Alan asks Aruka to reveal the whole story, she tells Alan that she will do that once they get home. While Charlotte starts freaking out about seeing the Crawfords, Aruka tells her that it's Alan who should be worried. Turns out, Alan quit school 3 years ago, without telling anyone, and this caused a big fight between him and their father. Alan, who had been quiet for so long, tells Aruka that he was hoping to be the next Zuckerberg and Zuck people's banter memes on Facebook. Hearing this, Aruka reveals to Alan that everyone still talks about the fight he had with their father. As they continue walking around the island, Charlotte expresses her sadness over never having a family that she can fight with. Alan hears this and tells Charlotte that it's time for her to take her pills, cause that right that gets people admitted to mental hospitals. However, Charlotte continues by mumbling how she is anxious about Natalia's future, since her older sister is a wanted person in the Neros Kingdom. Alan then assures Charlotte that since the allegations are all fake, he will help her. But before he can riz her, Lou and Gosetsu quickly jump on Alan to tell Charlotte they are there for her. Just then a fight breaks out in the marketplace. A white-haired mage quickly takes care of the two gunners who had been creating a ruckus. Aruka smiles upon seeing the man and calls him over. The mage arrives, greeting Alan and Charlotte. He then introduces himself as Harvey Crawford, and turns out he also happens to be Aruka and Alan's daddy. Hearing this, Charlotte is greatly shocked as Harvey looks like he's packing a weapon of mass destruction in his pants. Once they all arrive at the Crawfords' residence, Aruka introduces Charlotte and Alan as boyfriend and girlfriend. Harvey is pleased by the news and asks Charlotte if she is happy with Alan. Charlotte, being a dumb cow, tells Harvey how she's happy with Alan, since he teaches her how to do naughty things. A playful look takes over Harvey's face as he tells Alan he has a spell called fetus deletus to make naughty things extra safe. This causes both Alan and Charlotte to blush like crazy. Alan quickly tells Harvey they're waiting till marriage, which makes the older man tell Alan that he should return home. Alan, however, firmly declines and tells Harvey that he's comfortable living in his mansion. Aruka then tells Gosetsu and Lou how Harvey wants Alan to take over the position of headmaster, but Alan keeps rejecting the offer. Surprised, Gosetsu reminds Alan how being the headmaster of the Athena Magical Academy will make him a worthy man, but Alan insists that a title usually comes with a lot of a burden, and his back already hurts from carrying the weight of the Burj Khalifa in his pants. All of a sudden, a fun-sized girl walks in and Charlotte wonders if she's Alan's mother. But turns out, Harvey's full name is Harvey DiCaprio, and he likes his wife is barely legal. Alan then tells Charlotte how the reason Harvey wants to pass on the position of headmaster is because he wants to give him and Aruka more siblings. While Harvey and Alan butt heads, Charlotte tells Aruka and Harvey's mother, Lizzie, how her house is so lively. Lizzie smiles at the compliment and tells Charlotte that since she's dating her son, she's like a daughter to her too. The topic then changes and Alan asks Harvey about Natalia. Harvey then reveals that since the Evans family was disgraced, Natalia was sent to study at their school under fake identification. However, knowing his father, Alan asks Harvey what other news he has on Natalia. Instead of verbally explaining him, Harvey unveils a magical item known as the Mirror of Nostalgia, which can show another location. Using the mirror, Harvey shows Charlotte and Alan how Natalia has become a total thug and now bosses around other delinquents. As Charlotte starts to freak out, Harvey assures her that Natalia isn't all bad. Through the mirror, it is revealed that while Natalia does boss around other delinquents, she also takes care of her underlings. Since Alan used to be quite a bad boy himself, he agrees to bring Natalia back to the righteous path. That night, Lizzie shows Alan and Charlotte to their room. Seeing the queen-sized bed, Alan and Charlotte turn as red as two feverish kids from medieval Europe. Charlotte, however, gulps down her embarrassment and tells Alan to just share the bed with her so they can focus on their mission tomorrow. That night as Charlotte and Alan share the bed, Alan apologizes to Charlotte, saying that she might feel something poking her back during the back. Hearing this, Charlotte just smiles at the demon lord, which makes him realize that he might need the Hasta La Fetus spell after all. However, not wanting to be drained out for the mission, Alan tries to instead use a spell which will make him fall asleep. But the moment he unleashes the spell, Alan learns that his magic does not seem to be working. Curious as to why this is happening, Alan studies the bed and realizes that someone put a special spell on the bed to prevent Alan from sleeping. And of course, that person happens to be none other than Aruka, who is standing outside her brother's room with Gosetsu, waiting to hear clapping sounds. Meanwhile in the room, both Charlotte and Alan are unable to sleep. Out of sheer awkwardness, Charlotte starts a conversation by telling Alan how she is envious of the love between Lizzie and Harvey. On the contrary, Alan states that so much love cannot be good as his family now forces him to bear the responsibility he's not ready to tackle. Charlotte, however, insists on how Lizzie and Harvey are the ideal couple. This prompts Alan to envision himself and Charlotte saying cheesy things to each other. When Alan asks Charlotte if he should be more like Harvey, Charlotte becomes shy, which prompts Alan to retract what he said. Instead of letting go of the moment, Charlotte decides to seize the night by asking Alan what he wanted to tell her during the play Grimm forced them to act into. Alan pauses for a minute and wonders if he should confess or stay stuck in the friend zone. In that moment, Alan realizes how desperately he wants to wake up and see Charlotte whipping up a tasty breakfast for him, and then they would go shopping cause he knows how to take care of his lady. Similarly, Charlotte's heart starts to waver as she dreams about learning new naughty things with Alan, and then wrap the day up by saying goodnight to each other until morning comes and they can do all of those things again. Yet despite their hearts wanting each other, their minds force them to consider other factors. Alan thinks about how Charlotte has just started to walk on her own path and he should not burden her with his feelings. Similarly, Charlotte reaches the conclusion that she must not follow her heart, as she is a wanted criminal and would only cause trouble in Alan's life. In the end, Charlotte tells Alan to sleep as they will have a busy day tomorrow. Outside Alan and Charlotte's chambers, Aruka boils with anger as she fails to record Charlotte making happy noises. Just when she is about to beat Alan, Lizzie throws a fork at her and says she can always pop out more offspring. Morning comes and Alan is exhausted out of his damn mind over the lack of sleep. However, since he has a mission on his hand, he quickly gives Charlotte a transformation, but this time adds some glasses. Charlotte quickly goes to inspect her new get-up while Alan's heart goes all doki-doki, seeing Charlotte dressed like a Harvard baddie. Charlotte might be built like a blonde bimbo, but both Gosetsu and Lou quickly realize how Alan has a preference for glasses. After vehemently denying such accusations, Alan and Charlotte arrive at the Athena Magical Academy, where they quickly locate Natalia. Alan calls out her name, which alerts Natalia, who quickly takes her position to fight. Alan observes this and realizes that in just 3 months, Natalia has transformed into the Karate Kid. With a pissed look, Natalia asks Alan who he is, and the Demon Lord reveals he is Alan Crawford's. Hearing the surname, Natalia figures out Alan is related to the headmaster. On the other hand, Natalia's underlings reveal to her stories about the nefarious Alan Crawford's, who is also dubbed as the Great Demon Lord of the Magical Academy for his naughty behavior. Unfazed, Natalia asks Alan what does the Demon Lord and his assistant want with her. Alan reveals he has come to be her private instructor, but Natalia rudely rejects the offer and leaves the scene.
Emotional damage.
Now alone, Alan turns to look at Charlotte and finds her trembling with overwhelming emotions. She tells Alan how she for real no cap talked to Natalia. In response, Alan warns her that she will have to do a lot more than talking, as soon she will get to be a big sister to Natalia. The next day, Alan and Charlotte join Natalia in one of her lectures. In the class, Natalia proves that nobody pissed in her gene pool by outsmarting the teacher. On the other hand, her older sister, Charlotte, who clearly took all the stupid genes, tells Alan how she has no idea what's going on, but is happy to be here nonetheless. Alan seizes this opportunity and tells Natalia that since she is so smart, she should help out his dumb assistant, Charo. Charlotte, playing as Charo, happily adds that she'd be forever grateful for her guidance, which makes Natalia succumb to the pressure. After class, Charlotte is greeted by Gosetsu and Lou, which surprises everyone including Natalia, as owning a capybara and a fener as pets is uncommon. Later during lunch, Charo excuses herself to get more salad, leaving Natalia alone with Alan. Out of nowhere, Natalia asks Alan if he is sent by her family, the Evans. Alan assures her he is not and then asks her why she harbors hatred for her family. Natalia quickly reveals her family is filled with snobbish people who care for no one but themselves. Understanding the situation, Alan realizes that Natalia is learning magic so she can become independent from her family. Alan tries to get more out of Natalia by asking about Charlotte, but this dampens her mood, causing her to leave. However, on her way out, Natalia is confronted by another student, Chris, and his lackeys, who warn Natalia that she will soon face a crushing defeat from his hands. Natalia ignores Chris until one of his lackeys harass poor fragile Choro. This makes Natalia so upset that she starts a brawl in the cafeteria. Alan quickly intervenes and forms a subspace barrier where he is about to teach the brats a lesson when Choro angrily tells both Alan and Natalia that fighting is beyond naughty. After destroying the barrier, Choro makes both Alan and Natalia apologize for being bad kids. Once that is out of the way, Alan tells Natalia in private that he realized how she was fighting those who were being unjust to others. When Natalia doesn't deny the information, Alan states she must rule the academy. The next day, Aruka bursts through the doors and finds Alan, Charlotte, and Natalia. She quickly extends a warm greeting to Natalia and then introduces herself as Alan's sister. Natalia then excitedly reveals to Aruka that her brother is teaching her how to conquer the academy. While Aruka's mind opens wide in shock, Alan tells Natalia that if she manages to conquer the academy, all her troubles will disappear like our viewers' fathers. Ignoring his sister, Alan proposes to hold a challenge between her and Chris, which will determine who is to rule the academy. As Natalia expresses her interest in it, Alan tells her that he has a secret trick up his pants, which he can show her. In response, Natalia tells Alan that she wants to learn the secret trick, which will guarantee her win. Alan, pleased by Natalia's sharp wit, tells her that he is sure she can learn any lesson there is to be taught. Aruka finally breaks her silence and tells Alan that he was called by their father to bring Natalia on the right path. Similarly, Charlotte starts tweaking, knowing her sister is no longer the girl, which reflects the Lord's good light. That evening, Natalia quickly defeats Chris, which upsets the brat so much that he starts talking trash before leaving. Natalia's eyes then land on a dungeon's entrance, and she asks the gang why it is sealed. Aruka then reveals that the dungeon's boss happens to be ovulating, which is why the dungeon is sealed. Just then, Natalia's underlings arrive and reveal to her how they took care of all the bad guys. Slightly pleased, Natalia compliments them until Gosetsu and Lou arrive. Natalia quickly thanks Gosetsu for straightening her minions for her and even addresses the capybara as Professor. Once they all take their leave, Alan asks Natalia why she doesn't call him Professor. In response, Natalia tells Alan to not get ahead of himself. The gang then heads to the mess, where Churro tells Natalia she got her veggies for dinner. Natalia's face turns as green as the veggies, and she tells Churro that she cannot eat the vegetables as she does not want to be called a tree murderer. Hearing this, Churro becomes sad, which prompts Natalia to quickly gobble up all the veggies. Pleased by this, Churro offers a second helping. At the same time, Aruka and Alan gossip about how Charlotte and Natalia are unknowingly behaving like sisters. Aruka then asks Alan if he has talked about Charlotte with Natalia, but Alan discloses how that topic is a landmine for now. In the meantime, Natalia, wanting to get closer to Churro, asks her if she can teach her new magic spells. Delighted by this, Churro quickly agrees. Later that day, Natalia succumbs to exhaustion and falls asleep, so Alan and Charlotte decide to carry her to the dorm room. Upon entering, Alan and Charlotte discover a bag magically sealed by Natalia. Despite his curiosity, Alan comes to the conclusion that whatever is in that bag is very important to Natalia. Not wanting to part ways with her sister yet, Charlotte stays back to watch Natalia sleep. She then tells Alan how when she was living with the Evans, she would read Natalia books. However, now it seems that Natalia hates her family as she never wants to talk about them. This leads Charlotte to believe that Natalia hates her guts. Kosetsu and Lou, who had also been present in the room, assure Charlotte that Natalia loves her since she is very lovable. Alan even adds that it's still too early for her to reach that conclusion. The following day, Charlotte wakes up early to learn new magic tricks with Natalia. After training, Natalia tells Churro that she wants to show her something and takes her to her dorm room. However, upon arriving, Natalia becomes frustrated when she is unable to locate her bag. While searching her room, Natalia comes across a letter by Chris, telling her to come to the location mentioned in the letter or say goodbye to her bag. Filled with anger, Natalia runs out after telling Churro to keep this situation a secret from the Demon Lord. In the meantime, Alan tries to find Churro and Natalia, since they had been gone for too long. All of a sudden, one of Chris's lackeys rush over to inform Alan that Chris has proposed a challenge to Natalia in the dungeon. And knowing the dungeon boss is in ovulation, Alan becomes rather worried. In the meantime, Chris throws Natalia's bag in the dungeon and tells her that the first one to get the bag will be the true boss of the academy. On the other hand, Chris's underling reveals to Alan that before Natalia transferred, Chris was known as the genius, but since Natalia came, his record was broken by her, which made him desperate and insecure. Inside the dungeon, Natalia manages to beat Chris and gets her bag back, but her troubles are far from over as the dungeon boss makes an appearance. Seeing the huge chimera, both Natalia and Chris start freaking out. Just as the chimera is about to smash Natalia like she's an OnLife's model, and he's a married NBA player, Churro arrives and saves the day. However, instead of being thankful, Natalia becomes angry and asks Churro why she would risk her life for a stranger. Charlotte hesitates to reveal the truth, and instead tells Natalia that even when she is so strong, she is still a child who needs protection. Hearing this, Natalia tells Churro how she has a big sister. Knowing where the story is going, Churro tells Natalia that she knows how her big sister committed a huge crime, but before she can finish the sentence, Natalia becomes angry and tells Churro that her sister can never commit such a crime and was framed by the wretched prince. However, instead of helping her sister out, the Evans decided to cut her off. In that moment, Charlotte realizes how Natalia does not seem to resent her, but since she is a dumb cow, she asks the obvious question nonetheless. Natalia once again gets angry and states that she can never hate her sister, but she hates her family and herself for not being able to save her dear sister. By now, Natalia's eyes start to water as she talks more about Charlotte. After wiping her tears, Natalia tells Churro how she wants to be a powerful mage so she can hurt whoever captured her sister. Confused, Churro asks Natalia why she thinks Charlotte is in captivity. And so, Natalia reveals that the bag she holds so dear actually belongs to Charlotte, so when she tried to track Charlotte using the bag, her attempts were useless as someone else had placed a spell which would prevent anyone from finding Charlotte. Before Charlotte can reveal the truth to Natalia, Chris starts to bawl his eyes out overhearing such a sad story. Suddenly the ground starts shaking, and the gang wonders whose mom just walked in. That is until a salamander makes an appearance. Turns out the chimera was just a warm-up. The real boss of the dungeon is this fatso known as the salamander. As the salamander attacks Joro, the transformation spell she had on disappears and Natalia comes face to face with an unconscious Charlotte. Just then, Alan steps in, unleashing just a tinge of his mana, impressing and scaring everyone. The salamander quickly transforms from a scary dungeon boss to a cuddly orange cat. Liz then walks inside and reveals that it was Alan who raised the salamander. Once the situation is resolved, Natalia and Charlotte have a tearful reunion where Natalia reveals how she longed to hear a story from her sister. Charlotte also apologizes for lying to Natalia and keeping up a disguise. Once the waterworks stop, Lou and Gosetsu inform Natalia how Alan is Charlotte's boyfriend. This infuriates her so much that she starts attacking the Demon Lord. Things return to normalcy and Alan and Charlotte return to the mansion. Just when they are enjoying the peace and quiet, Matcha arrives with a package. Upon opening it, a summoning portal opens up, revealing Natalia. Aruka also arrives and states that they wanted to surprise Charlotte. Suddenly Grimm's makes an appearance and everyone except Alan and Charlotte are shocked to see such a renowned author in the same room as them. Grimm then reveals that her editor, Yor, is making her write a sequel to the book based on Alan and Charlotte, so she wants to hide in the mansion for a bit. At first Alan refuses until Aruka convinces him to relent as everyone is already present in the mansion. That night, Alan holds a feast which everyone enjoys. However, later that night when everyone is fast asleep, Charlotte and Alan indulge in one more naughty thing, which is stargazing. While sitting together, their hands touch, and when Alan tries to apologize, Charlotte reveals that she never minded his touch. Just when they're about to kiss, Alan thunders and tells everyone to come out. The entire squad then breaks into chaos. While some are mad at Alan for corrupting Charlotte, others are excited to see their love blossom. However, unbeknownst to all of them, in the nearest kingdom, the evil prince receives information on Charlotte and orders his guards to capture her. Do you think Alan hates being known as the Demon Lord? Comment smart baddies or get married to a trap. And if you like anime recaps, then watch this video here.